Thank you, and thank you, everyone. Good morning. We're still in morning. It's the last day for day extravaganza, and I hope you're enjoying yourselves. We can't be in Washington without having a conversation about the state of the state, our way, state of the state of feminist funding. And I'm so honored to be on this, to share with you this conversation with this esteemed panel. And I'm just going to ask questions and stay out of the way, essentially, so you can hear all their wisdom. But I'm going to start my first question with Dominique. And I wanted to start off with a question around kind of the elephant in the room. How do feminist funders show up now? And again, we're talking about state of the state. So we're talking about urgent, we're talking about now, we're talking about this year. How do feminist funders show up now in a way that transforms not only how they give, not only who they give to, but who they are as funders?
I think the first thing that we have to do is to start realizing that the systems and capitalism, where the money comes from, is a component of the conversation, but the money doesn't move without people. And if there are people involved, we have the feelings of the people. And I'm coming up on a year of being at Borealis, leading the Fund for Transgenerations. And I keep seeing folks wanting to divest from the human feelings that they have about whatever topic they're navigating. And in the space of feminist funding, historically, these are cis women. They may be queer, their partners may be trans, right? But if you are looking at folks who are leading funding efforts, in the United States, there are 2 Black trans women who are leading funds. Myself at Borealis and Bree Rivera at the Black Trans Fund, right? And FTG is the largest trans fund in the world. And I keep seeing folks share how they're afraid of doing it wrong, so that means that they're not trying. And we've seen that. We've seen that when it's come to including Black women in spaces where white women have been. We've seen that when it's come to discussing queer folks coming into heterosexual spaces. And we know that sets us up to give ourselves an excuse to not move the needle forward. And then we set up those who have been oppressed by the very systems to do all the work of tilling the soil and getting that seed ready for us to have some fruit to pull from, right? And so I want us to have the real conversations. I want us to be able to acknowledge that cis women, and specifically cis Black women, have been given a piece for as long as a piece has existed. And they are now seeing a world where the inclusion of trans women, Black trans women, can feel like you're taking my piece and you're cutting that into fourths. And that is a real feeling of, what about me? You know, and the words of Effie White, what about me? Right, very that. You right, those are real feelings. I can unpack fears. We can process fears all day. And unpacking fears doesn't mean that they don't pop back up. It means that we do the work to identify what is the fullest version and the best version of yourself. And how we catch it when you feel like you are regressing back into those fears and concerns. And I think that's where we begin. I have had incredible conversations this week, but if we don't name the fears that are rooted in the humans who are moving the dollars, everything we do will be performative. And I have not seen anything performative have long-term impact, because that's the goal, right? Impact. And if it's performative, it won't live past you in the work. I love Borealis. I won't be here forever. And I don't want to do anything that would not thrive without me being here. So as we go forward in these conversations, I want us to create spaces where we can really talk about the feelings and fears we have in regards to this inclusion and evolution of feminist funding that includes trans folks. And I think the Fund for Transgenerations, Borealis, these powerful intermediaries in the room, the folks like Aya Damons at Baltimore and DC Safe Haven, we can be a bridge, but y'all gotta walk over. You can't just kind of sit and say this bridge is scary. I want to take a picture. So come on across the bridge, child. We over here waiting for you.
Thank you so much. Latanya, how does big change show up for you in the state of feminist funding?
This is, first of all, thank you so much. This panel is, I think, fire. We're coming from, so many different places, but trying to get to the same space, I think. And I totally have this week been really thinking about this, how we're, even in the feminist funding world, struggling. And so I thank you for calling that out on the conversations that we're having. But it is also us trying to figure out, I've been at Global Fund for Women for almost 5 years, and we're still trying to figure out how to be backseat drivers, how to be passengers in this role. We're still trying to figure out how to be good partners in this work. The reality is that we have been determining sort of paths and siloing, even further siloing what other, because we're public foundations, right? We all, we give what we raise, but we have in many ways had to look at ourselves and ask, how are we changing the dynamic as we go? And I know for Global Fund for Women, that's been a real question that we've had to ask ourselves. How do we show up and how do we support others? And is it okay for us to do this as passengers instead of the drivers? And so I say that because I think we're in that transformation as feminist funders and ourselves thinking about the same things that we talk to our funders about. Being more flexible, being core, sort of trusting us. That we also have to continue to practice all the time. It is not like a checkbox is, one and done. It is something that you have to live, and it's the journey that you have to continue to be on. And so I know for me, and it's not just, combating that in yourself, which is where it starts, right? But it's also bringing your board along. It's also about, sort of transforming the organizations so that we call it, movement-led approach. That's what we've been calling this. And it's been interesting to watch. I think it's important to call a thing so that you can start moving towards it. But it doesn't happen overnight. It is a journey. And I think us from the feminist funding world, I think we have to also get used to being, passengers in this drive, and also be comfortable with just handing funding over and letting people do with it what they need to do in order to succeed as they have in their communities determined is right. And so all of that to say that I think it's a continuous journey. I think the state of funding for us is hopefully we are examples to other more larger philanthropic funders, but I think the reality is that we are going to have to continue to better ourselves. We're going to have to continue to be better partners out here in the world if we want to see the world that we keep talking about. And so I love what this room represents, but I also want to caution us, and I think Dominique was saying the same thing, to make sure that we're not the ones that acting like we know what it is to do it, right? We are also on that journey, and we're also evolving and continuously changing the way we show up in the world, and then we can be and continue to be I hope, the example to others of how we partner and take a backseat. So, thank you.
Thank you. Sarah, this next question is for you. How does Women Moving Millions show up in this way around holding that place around big change, but also humility, especially, again, thinking about the different constituents. Thank you.
Definitely, definitely. It's a really great question. I really see women moving millions. First of all, one of our core identities is really around humility. I think we have to approach that work with that spirit and that mindset. So with that, at Women Moving Millions, our community of 400 high net worth women philanthropists who are all committed to giving with a gender lens, we see ourselves in service to the movement. And in order to be in service of the movement, speaking about journey, you have to continuously cultivate and listen, and to approach the world with the spirit of curiosity. The learning is never, never done. And as we bring more voices to the table and we talk about, like, what does it mean to center the voices who have historically been marginalized, that's going to be a learning. So that's a whole nother layer of learning. It's like an onion. So as in my role, as our responsibility as a community and striving towards this extraordinary ideal of feminist philanthropy, we lean in a lot to what does it mean to live in the spirit of also trust and to be in relationship with the world, to be in partnership with your grantees? What does that actually look like? And where does all those power dynamics fit into that? How do you know when to step forward, step back? I know we've been talking a lot about that for the last several years in these spaces. But also, how do you think about investing power in other people, right? Sometimes I think, like, well, don't just step back, invest. Be an active participant in building power throughout the movement. I really, sort of carry the mantra for myself: think expansively, work inclusively. And I think that's the journey, that's the task that we have to do. We do over 60 programs a year, bringing in different people from different aspects of the movement, because we try to see ourselves as a bridge, funders to the leaders on the front lines in communities, so that there's that constant flow of communication, so that our funders know, okay, this is what I'm hearing. When I say we're in service of the movement, it means helping to elevate and amplify the voices of the movement so that we can actually do the change and we can be catalytic in the way that we aspire to be. Thank you for that question.
Thank you so much. Tynesha, thank you again for joining us. I know again, I'm just so honored to have everyone here on this panel today. It would be an honor to have even just one of you, but to be in this conversation, it's fantastic. The question is for you around big change and how that shows up for you and your organization in 2023 into 2024.
Hey, good people. I'm in trouble when they got me going last. I was like, I need to figure out something good to say. My spirit is still really moving from what everyone is saying, and just really feeling what Dominique really started us off with the fact that we're people. When I was thinking about this question about the state of feminist funding, I am sitting with kind of where we are right now when it comes to this political project of moving resources in the service of freedom. Like, this is a political project, and many of us, and it is. I love it that all I gotta do is say that.
Yes.
I was in a conversation over the last couple of days around abolition. We'll talk about abolition in a minute, because I think we have to figure out the words that we're still not allowed to say, which actually makes it the political project. I'm an abolitionist, right? So the reason why I'm saying, I was in a conversation and someone said from an indigenous sister in philanthropy was like, we have 3 roles that we can take in the sector. You can either hack philanthropy, change philanthropy, or ride the wave of philanthropy. And I am in the business of hacking philanthropy. Because the political project, in my opinion, is not to change a thing where our opposition lives, right? Or to ride the wave because it's a good job for some of us with some good benefits. We deserve good jobs with some good benefits. But the political project of moving resources in service of freedom that's going to dismantle the very thing that created the concentration of wealth in the first place is a political project. And so for me, the state of feminist funding is, where are we in our political project? And so one of the things, I'll say three things in terms of what bigness looks like for me in this political project of the work. Y'all, we gotta break some rules, and we've gotta be honest. We are all in really different relationships to this political project and different relationships to the proximity of power. We're all in rooms where we talk about it's time to write the check. I know some of us are like, I ain't got the check. And if I did, I would write it. And so, or some of us do have the check, but gotta talk to a family member before we figure out how to write another zero. And so for me, the first thing is we have to unlock the money, point blank, period. And have to be really honest with each other about how we move as much money that makes, as folks from Third Wave Fund, our hands and our voices shake because we nervous about what they're gonna say or what they're gonna try to do. That's how much resources we have to move. But the bigness is that how do we get to the place where we're being really, really honest about what challenges or barriers we're facing in order to get as much dollars out for as long as we can, for while we can. The second rule is we have to move money. I was thinking about it like when folks are like, when it comes to feminist funding, when it comes to really addressing the ways that white supremacy works, when it comes to even abolition, it's like it takes time for things to happen. But if it doesn't change in 3 to 5 years, we get frustrated and we move on to the next thing, or we get forced to move on for the next thing. Abolitionists did not start their work around abolishing slavery in this country on January of 1865. It didn't start in 1864. The first abolitionist organization on paper started in 1775, 90 years before slavery was abolished. But wait on though, the first slave rebellion in this country happened in 1663. It took 202 years. It will take time. And so I think in this political project, for me, what bigness looks like is that we work like abolishment should have happened yesterday, but we're in it for 202 years. And so I'm gonna be quiet now, but I am curious. Our jobs, this sector, I could give a damn. Right? Now, we can talk about it later. We all got families and responsibilities. I ain't lying about that. But I care about you, I care about me, and I care about what our project is. It is our responsibility to build the left flank infrastructure in philanthropy so we flank movement every time.
Yes. Yes. Latanya, yeah, I just need to like let that, yeah. I agree. Latanya, how does that show up? You have that global perspective. I mean, you see this. Our last panel talked about how all of this progress can be made. You could feel almost not quite complete, but very, very close to being at the end of that political project for your country. And then the mountain, the tsunami of pushback comes. You have the perspective of seeing this in multiple different locations around the world. How does this show up for you in your feminist funding?
So it's a great point, and I just want to, the project is global. So, I mean, this is, and it is not, and no great movement, I think, is relegated to one community. It may start in a community, but the breadth of it, of course, spreads. And there are oftentimes similar movements popping up in the same place without knowing each other. So I just, want to be clear that these issues are and will continue to be global because we live in a global world. As our sisters were talking about before this panel. But I will, say that I think sometimes when we do just sort of live in our own corners, it feels like we might be losing. I mean, you know, if you look at it, yes, the rollback of Roe in the US right now is among, you know, sort of comparatively, countries like Russia and Iran, right? That's kind of where we live. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, there's been more than over the last decade, 60 countries that have actually, including Mexico, and I know our colleagues are here, right? There's been wins in about 60 countries on the reproductive justice front, and specifically around abortion. So in the grand scheme of things, are we really losing? And for me, it's going to be important for us not to take that posture. I think I heard that with Paris earlier. It's like, it just depends on where you want to stand. In this work, I think we all have to stand on the side that we are winning. And I think what my sister is talking about is that long game, you gotta look at the whole thing, not just where you're sitting. And we are winning. We are winning globally. There are challenges, yes, and there will be. But if you're gonna stick to this game, then let's talk about the real race that's happening and who's in front. And I think when we think about Black and brown countries in particular, I mean, you know, I've lived in countries that have only been decolonized, and I'm talking about on paper, not in their heads, and for, you know, less than my age. So I think it's important for us to understand, you know, how this looks globally, and where we sit as a movement in that process. And I'll be damned, I'm on the winning team.
Dominique, how does this political project show up for you?
Oh, goodness. So I like these conversations of abolition. I am someone who identifies as someone who's formerly incarcerated, navigated that system as a young person, as an adult, and came into the work as a sex educator, and by complete accident became the executive director of Black and Pink National. Read the rules and bylaws when you join a boy jar, because I ain't know that the chair had to become the ED. And this idea of divesting from, removing ourselves from, was something that was so foreign to me, because the systems had tricked me into believing that I had to go through their process, I had to achieve their idea of me being better, all these things for me to be a good, upstanding citizen. And then you can get in there and you start unpacking and undoing. I think what is interesting for me as a Black trans woman, my everyday is about me undoing and disavowing some box that someone created for me around my body. And I then struggle how folks can't do that with every other system that exists. So when I'm thinking about undoing, my freedom is inherently tied to yours. Right? I love getting up at 6 a.m. for hair and makeup to show up, right? And I don't want anyone, be them trans or cis, to feel like that's what they have to do to come into this room, right? If a trans woman can come into this room with a little facial hair, the cis woman with PCOS can come into the room and experience the same thing. And this is about visual pieces. But the truth of the matter is, in feminist spaces, how people see you, how the world perceives you, can predicate your efficacy in this work, right? It's very real. And then I ask myself, do we want to not be oppressed, meaning the systems that have harmed us, we don't want that doing that to us, or do we want to be free? Those are two different things. And I believe that anyone who is coming into these philanthropic spaces representing an identity that historically has not been there, we carry the expectations of our communities. Every black trans girl, when I got this job at Borealis, was like, oh, one of us got in, right? The calls that I received, the emails that I received, because I know, even though I could divest, I'm gonna take this on because that is my space of accountability. That's how I'm connected to community and undo this space and abolish this space of tokenism that people love to put me in. But more importantly, I realize that if I don't separate myself from the systems while I'm understanding I'm navigating a system, because that's the other thing I see. The activists come over here to philanthropy and y'all complain all day. Y'all applied for that job. I love you. I love you, and I mean it. And you looked at that board and saw it was all white women. You saw that money went back 100 years to sharecroppers, and you applied. You went through 5 phases, including the screening interview. You did the final project to get to the last interview. You flew in and toured the facility, even if you work remote. And then you get there, and you are angry every day. And I say that to say that happens because when I talk about abolishing systems while understanding that the systems are gonna system, it means that I came into philanthropy, and I said this to young people on Sunday. I take my piece of the work, I get my piece of the pie, because I too love a good wig and a good bag. And I wanna hold my peace of mind. We come into these systems trying to change them. No. Either you will do too much and they'll kick you out, or you'll stay long enough to where you will conform. If you know what your treasure is going into this space, it's easy to divest when you know your time is done. You get to decide that. Abolition, a key tool of abolition is body autonomy, knowing where your body will go and where it will not go, right? And so as we have these discussions, as we are thoughtful about, we know where the root of this work comes from, but we are saying that we want to shift, we want to move, we want to, as an intermediary, I see myself as a co-conspirator. I am privileged to work under an incredible Black woman, Amaretta Morris at Borealis, who has made space for me. That's what my job is, and at 5 o'clock, I'm done. Yeah. I'm done because it's not mine to hold in that way. So going back to that human piece, I'm not gonna let us lose that. We have to abolish the idea that we also are the system. We cannot be mad at the system for taking us over if we are so comfortable with letting the system coalesce around us. You gotta know when you tap out.
Do not come to me. I refuse.
I actually want to open it up now.
I know. I mean, it's just an absolute mic drop. Everything is so right on. But so following up on that, we need to talk about political giving in these spaces. And, we can't talk about the political project without talking about investing politically. And it has been a topic that for far too long in the nonprofit sector and in philanthropy we have been avoiding. It's just our side, right? So hundreds of millions and billions of dollars are going into taking away our bodily freedom. So all of our effort and energy is going into ensuring our bodily freedom. But the project is broader than just our bodily freedom, right? It just feels like such a clever tactic to me. But at any rate, we have to be doing C4. We need to be investing in political giving, political leaders in order to have power and to push forward the change. We can only go so far. We do need to work within systems, and we all need to understand where our place is and how we can contribute to the movement and to the work and to the project. And we need to look at, what does it mean? When I began this work, I was saying to a colleague, man, feminist movement building sounds so beautiful. I'm in. What the hell does it mean? What does it mean? And how are we talking to funders about what it means to be funding feminist movements in this country and around the world? And I think it's really important for us to figure out how to make that tangible, how to break it down, so that people know that that political lever is a piece of it, right? That all of the core components of infrastructure of movements need investment. But that's one of the most important levers we've been missing. So I just wanted to add that into the stew.
In that space of political investment, I want to also say, so I identify as a programs girl. I came, Jill is in here somewhere, I think working with the Women's Fund in Omaha, Nebraska. Shout out, where Nebraska at in the room? Shout out to Nebraska. I used to do that 2 years ago, and it would be silent. But this idea of one of my fears is that in philanthropy, we only know how to pivot. We don't know how to spread our arms further. And in the space around trans issues, folks were like, well, we want to invest in policy. And I'm like, okay, for the 10 years it's going to take on this law, we can't forget to house people. And so this conversation of, I think, this life-saving work and then life-thriving work, I believe we can do both. And this political education, young people around their political autonomy, supporting organizations that are doing said work, and I would love to see us do a better job of establishing the relationship between policy and the C4 and folks on the Hill and how that gets to the people who are living below the Hill, right? Because that disenchantment that happens when you feel like those supports have left you, it will position those individuals to not be excited when it's time to go vote around the policy we fought to get on the ballot. So I think that relationship keeps us thoughtful about being expansive, and it prepares change makers, and in this the voters, the folks who are in community who can continue to push that, to be invested, because while we did this larger work that is the 200 years if we have to, you were fed, you were housed, you were seen. In the meantime, also, we cannot forget incarcerated people in any of these conversations. Women are being heavily incarcerated, and in regards to Roe versus Wade being repealed, one of the first calls I got, and a person on parole had to get permission from their parole officer to go the next state over to go get an abortion. And the parole officer denied it, which meant they would not be able to go. So as you all are having these conversations around bodies, around states who are defining things, what does it mean when the state owns you and the state creates a definition that erases you?
Thank you. I can't believe there was a shout out to Nebraska, because I'm from Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm like, did that just happen?
Girl,
Nebraska?
you ain't said nothing.
Nebraska's in the house right now? What is that?
Runza, Omaha born and raised. What's good?
That's amazing.
I feel like now I got something to say. I'm like, ooh, it's when you on a panel so good, you just want to be a participant. I'm sitting with two, when it comes to what we're doing, right now we're in a moment, we're talking about strategy, right? I'm sitting with two things, right? You had named, that was so good, when you folks studied the board and did all the interviews and met at the job. That was so good. In fact, I'm gonna reflect on that for my own self. One is, in a political project, it requires you to be a good organizer. You're not a good organizer if you haven't done any assessment. And a lot of us, and this is why I think these spaces are important, is a lot of us are in the job and we haven't done an assessment. And so we are creating interventions and strategies in response to a lack of mapping or understanding of our current context and how far it could go. And so I'm just sitting here with piece was the importance of an assessment. One of the assessments that I'm naming, you talked about it, Dominique, I'm gonna sit next to you on every panel, around life-saving and life-thriving work. One of the issues with our assessment is, and this is from some incredible Black movement theoreticians, that talks about what it means to fund the peaks and the valleys. And we have a thing in relationship to movement, when I'm thinking about life-saving and life-thriving work, where we only want to respond in the face of, and I've shared this before, to spectacular tragedy. There's a relationship, including with feminist philanthropy and feminist funding, where we are moved in the face of some spectacular Black death. But we are not moved by, for example, Black life. We are not moved by Black liberation or Black joy. But pain and death, we'll pay attention for a little bit. That's an assessment we have to pay attention to. And so there's an opportunity for us to think about, we know what the peaks look like, right? There are mass mobilizations, large-scale protests in response to flashpoints and moments where we've got to respond to something that is oftentimes spectacular tragedy. One of the things I encourage folks is, what does the valley look like? Because the valley is where people are still living. People are still organizing and moving. Infrastructure is being built. People are trying to nourish their lives so they can get ready for the peak. If we're only responding in relationship to movement with a sense of urgency, where it's only about the peak, it's only about death, it's only about tragedy and pain, that it continues a really toxic relationship with movement. And a toxic relationship with ourselves. And so one of the things in our assessment is I'm encouraged by is like, what does it mean to fund in the moments where it might seem quiet? It ain't quiet when folks are taking care of their families. Right. It is not quiet when folks are just taking care of movements and they're building and getting ready because the reality is another peak is coming. And so one of the things I encourage folks is like, and I encourage myself, is let's continue to do our assessment, and it needs to be collective. And this is our moments to be able to be in those kinds of conversations. But we have to be able to be resourcing and in partnership with life and not death.
Latanya, I'm actually going to leave the last 8 minutes for each of you to ask a question to each other.
Ooh. Oh, I like that. Yeah. So sorry. I'll just start. I mean, so first of all, I am just in love with Tynesha, just meeting Dominique, but I do want to ask the question around, so how long do you stay in relationship? I love this concept of the peaks and valleys, and I also want you to talk about the really groundbreaking work that you're doing with the Black Feminist Fund. But this idea, for me, when I think about peaks and valleys, it means you're there the whole time. And I think, Dominique, you were mentioning that as well. It means that you don't leave, and the relationship exists as long as your philanthropy exists. And I know that coming out of the international development world, it's like, what's sexy, who you gonna fund now, and then who will you fund in 5 years? But since I've been in the feminist funding world, this idea of you are walking in partnership. And I think it was something that you mentioned, Dominique, about, when to know when to come out, is when those partnerships don't exist anymore. I mean, you are part of it, is what I'm trying to say. And so how then do you kind of implement that in the feminist funding world? How do you get at these concepts around time and how long a grant is? How does that relationship look for you? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so around like how long you should be in partnership with movement at a particular institute, like at a fund. Ooh, that's a hard question. I'll just say quickly at the Black Feminist Fund, shout outs to Black feminists. At the Black Feminist Fund, we've been dreaming for 12 years now, but in the world for 2 years, because out in the world just means we have some money now. And I think, all Black feminists should be funded and resourced for the work that they do, and one day that will be the case. At the Black Feminist Fund, our grant making is 8-year grants. So we start with 8 years, right? And we're now funding, in our first 2 years, we've moved $14 million, and we're about to move another 16 in 2 years in 8-year commitments. I mean, I think, it's a tricky question. I think the first thing I'll just say is, we know this, and again, we keep saying this over and over again, But 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, I mean, ask any liberator of our time, like how long it would take for you to get free. If we went in 1663 and was like, how long is it gonna take for you to win abolition? How long is it gonna take for you to end slavery? Like, that's wild. It is generations long fight. So my thing is, how much money you got? Is my first question. How much money you got, and how long can you move it, and where you can go get more money from? We have to get to the place, y'all, where we're making 10-year commitments. 8 years is how much money we had at the moment. We have to be able to model. We talk about what trust looks like. The way trust is, we have a racialized and gendered trust gap. We talk about it. There's a way that anti-blackness works in our sector, which means we control grants by time and by the kind of money that the kind of grants that we move, whether it's project specific or general operating. And my thing is, we have to break those rules by going in and making the longest grant possible without restriction. Because the reality is like, until we start making 10-year grants and 20-year grants, we're not gonna be able to be truly invested in movements. Is that answering your question?
I also think that folks need to figure out what goal they want to be in co-conspiratorship around. Yeah. So is it the eradication or the shift of the issue? That is a 10, 20, 30-year piece. Is it we are in community with you in this way? Because I think there's various ways to be in community. I think that's one thing we struggle with. We only know how to give the check. One thing I've struggled with leading a fund is sending an email about an update doesn't feel like I've really connected with you, right? So what are you in relationship for? Or is it we get you to the point where you can get the $1 million grant? Like, what is our part of the relationship? We've all dated that person. It should have been 6 months. I married a Leo with green eyes, tried to make it 6 years. I made it through the valley and I'm here, amen. Huh? And I say that to say, when you know for us to do a better job of what the goal is. 2, I think we lose that piece of public health where the people we're in service to will tell us when we are hitting it and what that looks like. 3, I don't think anybody's working to not have a job. I think that is a real, like, am I working to no longer need to be there as an intermediary in this way? And last but not least, when we are talking about fund investment and we are talking about relationship long term, how are we prepared to support them in being ready for the next thing? And I see a lot of spaces where philanthropy is like, we're hands off. And I think unrestricted funds and all of that is the powerful place, but hands off, I don't 100% agree with that, because that was the funding in 2020 where y'all pushed all these orgs, and I say y'all because I wasn't in the community at that time. They push everyone to these huge orgs, and your entire setup for your tax filings changed, and then they stepped back. And so now in 2023, I'm seeing all of these orgs shutter. So I also think that this piece of being in relationship, yes, maybe we could only give you the money now, but it's like you can still call us and ask us this question, or we're still gonna be conveners around this topic, or you will still have access, but negotiating that. But more than anything, everyone will not be what Tynesha is. I think everybody wants to be what other people are. We're the org that supports you for 2 years, and we support you for 2 years like this. It's really exciting. Do you wanna do that? Compared to being the guy on Tinder that's like, I want to marry you, and it's like, you're already married. How are we gonna do that, right? So are we dating? Are we getting married? What is the thing? And I think if we could talk about that more,
Better make it romantic.
You know, I'm a girl with ADHD. I got a vision. I got to see it. I got to envision it. But as someone who has seen that work from mass incarceration. And I've seen the pivot from mass incarceration. Everybody loved incarceration, and now folks are back at repro. We cannot afford to miss the lessons we learned at how folks played and really didn't set up folks in those issues to sustain good work going forward.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Thank you.
That's right.
I have
Sarah?
a question.
Yes.
This is for Latanya. What gives you hope? to stay in this work?
This room, honestly, I came on Sunday and I just been, a lot of stuff has been going on as is normal, right, for us. But this does give me energy. All the people I've met this week, even the opportunity to be on the Hill with people who are with us or not with us, the energy to fight back comes from these kind of convenings, and and it's like, oh, they're so expensive. It's like, get everybody here. But it does something for my soul to be up on this stage with all of you today, and I need that. I need that to be able to keep moving it, to keep doing it, to keep learning, to keep surviving myself, but also to make sure our partners are thriving. So this is a thank you to all of you in this room, because it's been a sheer joy to be here and hearing from all of you this week, honestly.
Thank you.
I have a question for Sarah. Let's say folks cannot move millions, they're moving hundreds, they're moving thousands. What are the top 3 things they should be thoughtful of? If they, I watched I Be Black Girl back in Omaha start at folks donating $5 and $10, and those changes. What prepares you to move millions when it's 100 and it's thousands?
Well, I love that question, and the good news is the $1 million commitment can be over 10 years. 10-year term, so we're all aligned in that. I think that first, give to your local women's fund.
Yes.
Local women's funds, I don't need to tell this room why that's the right thing to do. You all know, so that's good news. And I think the second thing I would say is, philanthropy should be an act of joy and love. So think about where you want to move your love and move your money with your love. And then 3, learn about the world around you. I mean, we're talking a lot about being in relationship. Get to know your community, get to know the people you're investing in, and do it in a really authentic, deep, I'm in it with you kind of way, so that you can bring other people to the table. And there's this catalytic effect. It might be 1,000, but what if you brought 10 people to the table? That $10,000 means a lot. I greatly appreciate a $10,000 check. I greatly appreciated that. I never take anything for granted. It is all a gift. And I feel tremendous gratitude for every dollar. So I think the biggest thing is lean into love.
I think we'll close with Dominique and Tynesha. What brings you hope now? Same question for you, Tynesha.
I every day wake up as living data. Even this thought of how long do you stay in co-conspiratorship with someone? In 2009, I walked out of Nebraska Department of Corrections, and maybe 6 months later, I went into a space because I needed rental assistance and help to keep my lights on. In 2016, that woman, Ann Smolsky, was over the reproductive justice program at Charles Drew under the Women's Fund of Omaha, and I was her first hire. And then a year later, I was at Black and Pink, and so that's 2017. This is what, 2023. I have had people invest in me and my best self, and that brings me hope. I get to manifest hope by waking up. I get to manifest hope through the Fund for Transgenerations. Young trans people bring me hope. They look in the face of harm and people telling them they don't exist every day, and they push back and they go to school and they work their jobs and they love each other. And last but not least, Black women give me hope. I need to say, as a Black trans woman who is in love with my transness, that I love Black women. That I know that my existence is predicated on your existence, that me thriving means that you have to thrive, and I can tell you all that I am not an anomaly amongst Black trans women. And so if I can't find hope in myself, if I don't have hope looking at my history, all I have to do is look at a Black woman and I find myself rooted.
I'm not just saying this, you give me so much hope. You really do. I know, I am too. Black people give me so much hope. It gives me hope to be in a space where there are more of us. We talked about this being a political project. It's a weird project to move, challenge, and organize money, because money itself holds so much pain. And our relationship to money holds so much pain. And to be in a sector where we're moving something, where we have such a complicated relationship in service of freedom. As Crystal Kaling says, I am not moving resources towards movements working on a kinder, more gentler suffering. Some folks are. A kinder suffering. This is about freedom and the liberation of all folks, my people. So to be in a space, to be in a project, organizing alongside other folks who are in service of freedom too, that's different. This is not the same room it was 10 years ago, and it's not the same room 20 years ago. And so I'm really encouraged, and I talked about it earlier, it is our responsibility to be the left flank in the sector. Call it whatever you want, but that's what it is. To be the feminist flank, to be the liberatory flank, many of us to be the black flank in philanthropy. I have hope that that shit can happen with some strong organizing, an incredible dynamic and changing assessment, and eyes on freedom and freedom alone. We can unlock unprecedented resources. And years down the line, come back to a sector that is dwindling because it don't need to exist anymore. I am hopeful about that. And then when movements call and come, they don't need to call and come because we have been there, we are in partnership. I am hopeful about what we can create. What a time to be in this project.
I know, we are over, and but again, thank you so much for the wisdom and the hope that each of you bring me, and with that, just another round of applause, y'all. Thank you so much.